It's 2 p.m. on Friday, November 14th here in Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung, and these are the stories we are following at this hour. President Park Geun-hye arrives in Australia to attend this year's G20 summit on Friday. Before that, though, she expresses her hope for a trilateral summit between Korea, China, and Japan. The IT services unit of Samsung Group Samsung SDS makes a strong trading debut on this Friday. Its share price more than doubled from its IPO price of approximately $170 in early trading. And more than 24 hours have passed since Rosetta's robot probe landed on a speeding comet. It's now stable and sending pictures, but scientists have now raised concerns about the probe's short battery life. Now, President Park Geun-hye is now in Australia for this year's G20 summit. As I said, before arriving, she was in Myanmar to attend a couple of regional forums, and that's where she talked about the possibility of holding a trilateral summit with the leaders of China and Japan. Choi Yoo-sun has our top story.
At an annual meeting with the leaders of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, China and Japan, hosted by Myanmar this year, President Park Geun-hye has openly expressed hopes to meet her Chinese and Japanese counterparts. This comes as historical and territorial differences in Northeast Asia have led tensions to rise in the region. The last time the three countries' leaders met was in 2012. A slight gaining of diplomatic momentum among the three nations was witnessed at the APEC summit in Beijing earlier this week, when President Park talked about a tripartite foreign ministers meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Although nothing has been fixed, Korea's presidential office says it hopes to arrange the top diplomats gathering sometime before or after the end of next month.
We'll be able to talk about when and how we can hold a leaders' summit, depending on the outcome of the foreign ministers' meeting.
Park also had a brief encounter with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, where the two leaders agreed to encourage officials involved in high-level talks to make progress in resolving Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. It, however, remains to be seen how the latest rounds of diplomacy and reconciliatory gestures will work to thaw Korea's relations with Japan, as Seoul is adamant Tokyo must first take responsibility for its past wrongdoings. President Park has touched down in the Australian city of Brisbane, where she will join leaders of the Group of 20 nations to seek an action plan to achieve a collective economic growth of 2% above trend in 5 years. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News, Brisbane.
North Korea says it will send its top Communist Party official Choi Ryong-hae to Russia as leader Kim Jong-un's special envoy. Pyongyang's state media reports that Choi, who's widely seen as the second-in-command in the north, will visit Russia. It did not specify the timing of the trip, though, saying only that it will happen in the near future. Insiders say Choi will likely meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The move comes amid signs that cooperative relations between the two countries are growing through recent high-level meetings. Now, analysts say this is a good start for Samsung Group's restructuring. Samsung SDS, the group's tech services unit, surged on its first official day of trading on this Friday. Shares are trading at double the initial public offering price, and experts say that could go even further up. Kim Ji-yeon has this report.
Samsung SDS, the group's IT services affiliate that specializes in system integration, doubled its initial public offering price, starting its first day trading at roughly $345. Although it's 10% lower on average than estimates made by 7 local securities firms, in one leap, the company has become the 5th largest company in Korea in terms of market capitalization. The hype surrounding the company's IPO reflects high expectations the Samsung affiliate will be increasingly utilized as the group undergoes structural changes since its chairman Lee Geon-hye was hospitalized in May following a serious heart attack. The 3 heirs of the Lee Geon-hye family family fortune own a combined 19% stake in Samsung SDS. An Jae-min, an analyst for Seoul-based Kium Securities Company, says the heirs are expected to sell off their shares in Samsung SDS to pay their inheritance taxes. The analyst adds the future of the company looks bright, mainly due to its distribution business, and expects the share price to rise well past $400 even after the hype dies down. Kim Jung, ARIRANG News.
China is one of the few economies recording more than 5% annual growth, but that may no longer be the case in the near future. A U.S. research institute, the Conference Board, predicts Beijing's economic growth will be in the 3% range 5 years from now. At a press conference in New York on Thursday, the institute said it expects the Chinese economy to experience a soft fall over the next decade. Unlike a soft landing, which means economic stabilization after a recession, a soft fall means economic momentum will continue to deteriorate due to China's transition from an export-driven economy to one that's more domestically focused. It says China's economic growth will begin to slow starting next year, falling to 6.5% from this year's 7%. Now, in exactly 10 days, the Korean military will hold defense drills on and around Korea's Dokdo Island in the East Sea. It's a regular exercise that takes place twice a year since 1986 amid Japan's ongoing territorial claims to the island. Kim Hyun-bin has more.
The South Korean military is scheduled to conduct a defense drill aimed at deterring trespassers on its easternmost island of Dokdo later this month. A government source said Friday that the drill is scheduled to take place on November 24th, and the goal will be to repel non-military forces that approach the island via sea or air. The Korean Navy will employ 5 to 6 destroyers and convoys, as well as some patrol planes and fighter jets. The official says the Marine Corps will simultaneously conduct a landing exercise on Dokdo using a UH-60 helicopter. The exercise has been carried out twice a year since 1986, and the latest drill took place in May. Experts say the exercise is carried out to prevent Japanese forces from landing on the island. Japan claims that Dokdo is part of its territory, though it never established its sovereignty over the island. Seoul reclaimed sovereignty over its territory, including Dokdo and other islands around Korea, upon its independence from Japan's colonial rule from 1910 to 1945. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
In the year 2012 for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. More than a day has passed since the robotic lander from the European Space Agency's Rosetta mission successfully touched down on a speeding comet. The probe is said to be stable and is sending images back to Earth, but scientists fear the batteries could go out soon. Ji Myung-gil reports.
The Philae space probe that made history by touching down on a comet 500 million kilometers from Earth has achieved another remarkable first by sending back stunning images of the comet's surface. One of the photos released by the European Space Agency shows one of the lander's legs on the jagged, rocky surface of the comet. The agency thinks the lander could be resting on its side, possibly with one leg extended into open space, and concerns are rising about the probe's battery life. Philae appears to be sitting under the shadow of a huge crater wall, so scientists may have a hard time recharging its solar batteries. Scientists had been hoping for 6 to 7 hours of sunlight to charge the batteries, but it looks like Philae will only get a maximum of 2 hours of illumination during every 12-hour rotation of the comet. Under the current circumstances, Philae may cease to operate beyond Saturday. Engineers are thinking of repositioning the probe to maximize the lander's exposure to sunlight. Regardless of what happens in the coming days, the mission's priority will be on collecting as much information as possible from the comet. Researchers hope to pull up some subsurface material for laboratory analysis. Scientists believe comets delivered water to planets and may hold some answers to the origins of life and the formation of the solar system. Philae has a Twitter account with all the latest images from the comet's surface. Users can check them out by following @Philae 2014. Kim Young-gil, ARIRANG News.
Liberia has ended its national state of emergency in terms of the Ebola epidemic. While noting that the fight against the deadly virus is not over, the country's president said Liberia has come a long way since August, when it became the outbreak's epicenter, and that the government had determined there has been enough progress to lift the emergency measure. Now, meanwhile, the international humanitarian organization Doctors Without Borders has agreed to partner with researchers in Europe to test 2 experimental drugs and 1 convalescent plasma treatment at its clinics in West Africa. The trials will involve 400 people, with early results expected in February. So far, there is no vaccine for the Ebola virus, which has now killed more than 5,000 people in West Africa since early this year. Moscow and Kiev are exchanging barbs, with each saying the other violated a September ceasefire. This as NATO accuses Russia of sending military equipment and troops into rebel-held eastern Ukraine. Now, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe said it spied a vehicle marked Cargo 200 among the clusters of Russian tanks, artillery, and air defense systems entering Ukraine, and that's apparently a vehicle used to transport soldiers' bodies. Now, the United Nations Security Council also convened an emergency session on Ukraine on Thursday on concerns that full-scale fighting could break out in the country's east. The world governing body of football is at the center of attention again over the highly questionable winning bids for the 2018 and 2022 World Cup. As soon as a FIFA ethics report cleared Russia and Qatar, also formerly known as Qatar, of corruption allegations, the man behind the independent investigation labeled the report as false. Connie Lee tells us more.
These latest developments are a farce, even by FIFA standards. The head of an independent investigation into alleged World Cup corruption says FIFA's summary of his report is flat out wrong. The report, published Thursday morning, cleared Russia and Qatar of any significant wrongdoings in their winning bids for the 2018 and 2022 World Cups. Just hours after the report was published, Michael Garcia, the man who spent 2 years on the investigation, branded the report erroneous and said he would appeal to FIFA. The head of the English Football Association told reporters that he thinks the FIFA report is a joke.
It has made a bit of a mockery of the whole process. If the person who did the investigation says the report didn't reflect what he believed, I'm a bit shocked by it all. I think it's now pretty ugly for FIFA.
The FIFA report criticized England over its bid to host the 2018 World Cup, accusing it of disregarding the rules. The head of England's bid believes the entire ethics report could be questioned.
The process was flawed from the beginning, in our view, and it didn't have the confidence that it should have done.
Russia won the right to host the 2018 Games, beating England. However, suspicions have been piqued ever since Qatar, the 2022 World Cup host, was accused of paying bribes to FIFA officials in return for winning the hosting rights. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
After making a big debut here in Korea last week, the movie Interstellar is soaring even higher on the wings of strong word of mouth. Some say the sci-fi genre is finally getting its day in the sun here in Korea. But can the local industry get in on the action? For some answers, we have our film critic, Conran, in the studio. Good afternoon, Piers.
Good afternoon.
So the movie has been getting a lot of buzz, and it's going strong at the box office. So how would you account for its success, and how far do you think it will go?
Well, I think the film certainly has been receiving a lot of buzz ever since it's been kind of marketed for the last few months, and it really has this big picture event feel, and so I think that kind of ensured a strong debut. And we saw that. In fact, the debut in Korea was much bigger than in other markets. Mm-hmm. It opened to about $50 million in the States, whereas it opened to something like $15 million in Korea, and so that's kind of, if you consider like how many people are seeing it, in terms of the size of the country, that's double the opening. And beyond that, the film is poised to do even better in its second weekend. It's running about 50% ahead of last week, which is really extraordinary. And I think that we can account for that, where it's not just a question of the film's vision and ambition. It's really kind of this blend of its kind of the emotional angles of the film. So it's kind of it's a full package that I think is particularly appealing for Korean audiences.
Mm-hmm. And last year we had Snowpiercer and Gravity making a big hit for the Korean audience. So is it safe to say at this point that sci-fi genre is booming in the Korean cinema industry?
I wouldn't go quite so far, but I do think that Korean spectators are very interested in spectacle. We see there are certain viewing formats that are very popular in Korea, like IMAX and of course 4DX. Mm-hmm. And these days when you see a film, you can do it so many different ways. There's different sound you can use, there's Atmos, things like that. And so films like sci-fi kind of is very much a cinema of spectacle, and often it's you want to see it in the best visual way possible. Mm-hmm. So we have films like Gravity, which was very much an event picture as well, which kind of was showing a new experience in the cinema, and so that was people were very keen on that in Korea. And the same thing with Snowpiercer was very much a visually appealing film, but also made by a big Korean filmmaker. Mm-hmm. And so that was a very exciting moment. People we're excited to see a Korean film with big kind of Hollywood and British stars. Now the thing is, Interstellar is going to be close to 5 million admissions by the end of this weekend, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think it's already going to go much further than Gravity. But if we take Snowpiercer as a benchmark, which finished at about 9.3 million, mm-hmm. which makes it currently the 11th most successful film in Korea. I think Interstellar may come close to that. I mean, 7 or 8 is looking pretty safe right now, and depending on how it goes, it may go even further.
Mm-hmm. I personally went to watch the Interstellar last week, and if I went, it means 5 other of my friends went as well, so that's just a statement there. And I can't really recall that many sci-fi Korean films, though. Can you give us a little overview of the history of the sci-fi movies made by Korean directors?
Well, the truth is there's not a huge amount to say about that.
Right,
and that's what's a shame. There are only a handful. And those handful that have existed haven't really done very well. If we take out Snowpiercer from the equations, that's a bit of an anomaly. Mm-hmm. But if we look at some of the films that did exist, we have to kind of go back a little bit further. We can look at 2002's 2009 Lost Memories. It's a 2002 film. That's the title of the movie, 2009.
Oh, that's featuring Jang Dong-gun?
Yes, that's right, exactly. Mm-hmm. And also Natural City, which I think is 2003. Wonderful Days, which was also known as Sky Blue. That's an animated film from around the same time. And then we could look at last year's 11 a.m. as well. So all of these have done quite badly, and the industry, as a result, I think is quite hesitant to greenlight these projects, kind of assuming that Korean audiences are not very interested in these films. And I think that furthermore, the problem in the Korean film industry is that sci-fi has been somewhat underdeveloped. We have films that are they're exploring some ideas, some sci-fi ideas, but not going very, very far with it. I can't even think of a sci-fi that's gone into space in Korea, for instance. And films kind of they use it more as a setting. 2009 Lost Memories kind of is a revisionist film that deals with the Japanese colonial period, and something like 11 a.m. is more geared towards family drama. Films that have incorporated sci-fi more successfully include Save the Green Planet, although that was also a big flop, and then The Host, which is only a small bit of sci-fi, but again, it's a Bong Joon-ho film. So Bong Joon-ho seems to be the only name that can really make this work in Korea, at least in financial terms.
Okay, so apart from Bong Joon-ho, why do you think Korean filmmakers are struggling, especially with sci-fis then?
Well, I guess financial limitations will come into it. We look at a film like Interstellar or Gravity, and these things cost well over $100 million, whereas, you know, the height of budgets in Korea doesn't really go much more over 10, unless we're talking about international co-productions. But so that could be part of it. Perhaps filmmakers think, well, if we had more money, perhaps we could do something more. But I think there's more to it than that. Again, these films, I think it's a basic misunderstanding of what sci-fi is, or why sci-fi is a popular genre around the world. Typically, it's seen as a genre of ideas. If you think of the classic films of 2001 and all the rest of it, it's about kind of you know, pushing the bounds of what we know as a species, and kind of trying to create something new and exciting, not just visually, but also kind of mentally. And I think kind of Korean film haven't really explored that. They use it, as I've already mentioned, as a setting. So 2009, Lost Memories is about using this kind of sci-fi in a way to kind of revise Korean history. And 11 a.m. is kind of, it's almost like a TV drama with it's kind of a big family drama, and they just kind of, they add this sci-fi element to make it work more. So to quote Christopher Nolan's previous sci-fi film, Inception, I think the Korean film industry could do with just to dream a little bigger.
Yeah, that was a huge hit in Korea as well back then.
Yes, it did well.
So in light of the popularity of the sci-fi movies, I mean, the Korean filmmakers know that the audience is definitely interested in sci-fi movies. So would that inspire them in some way to try to make some original sci-fi fiction movies?
I certainly hope so. But I'm always going to be very wary when a new Korean sci-fi comes. Last year, 11 a.m. was something that I was interested in because it starred Dong Jae-young, who I like very much. It's time travel. I thought it could do quite well. But ultimately, it just, the filmmakers demonstrated kind of this lack of understanding. So I don't think it's always going to be a slam dunk. But I think Interstellar, you know, is this kind of combination of ideas and this kind of emotional side, which is very popular for Asian audiences. So perhaps that will prompt Korean filmmakers to attempt a different style of sci-fi, and perhaps we could see more in the future.
All right. Interstellar and Inception, I mean, they are even like huge masterpieces in Hollywood. So if a local filmmaker was looking for inspiration, what movies would you point them to, apart from Interstellar and Inception?
Well, of course, I would point to, 2001, the great classic. You know, everyone kind of points that as kind of the big sci-fi. But also, perhaps, sci-fi films that could be realized on a smaller scale. You know, Alien is a great film that was incredibly successful. And the first one is really self-contained. It's a chamber piece. It's all set on a spaceship. So that could easily be done in Korea. The same could be said of films like Terminator or Donnie Darko, which had much lower budgets than other sci-fi films. And you could even look inward. There's a filmmaker called Oh Young-do who makes great films here in Korea. He made films called Invasion of Alien Bikini, a young gun at the time. Those cost $5,000 and $30,000 each, so they cost really nothing. They look really great. So you know, it is possible, but yeah, it'll need a little bit of creativity, I think.
Okay, so it's not booming yet, but it's getting there. Definitely.
I hope so.
Okay, thank you very much, Piers, for coming into the studio today and sharing your insights with us.
My pleasure.
Seoul and Incheon had their first snow of the season in the very early hours of the morning, and that's 4 days earlier than last year. And the sub-zero temperatures we had earlier are turning into a mild afternoon. After the winds die down, there's plenty of sunshine across the nation, sending temperature into the double digits. And the daytime high in the capital will rise to 10, while Daegu tops at 11, and Gwangju and Busan will climb to 12. As for the other regions, Daejeon and Jeju Island will peak at 13 and 10 respectively, while Dokdo will see a high of 8. And for those who plan to be outdoors this weekend, beware that the weather should cooperate on Saturday, but on Sunday, we'll have passing showers nationwide in the afternoon. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Now, this just coming in, the nation's transport ministry has suspended the nation's second biggest carrier, Asian Airlines, from flying from Incheon to San Francisco for 45 days. Now, that's for the airline's crash landing last year, which happened in July 2013, killing 3 and injuring dozens more. And we will bring you more updates in our next newscast. And that does it for this edition of our newscast. I'll be back with more at 4 p.m. Korea time.